Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to the Wisconsin chapter January 2026 um, meeting. We thank you all for being here. And couple of things here. First of all, I'm Mike Yuhas. I'm the membership chair of the Wisconsin chapter. I'm sitting in here for Keith Schmidt, who couldn't be with us today. Keith, our chapter president. And just a couple of short announcements before we get started here. Uh, for those who have not yet paid their Wisconsin chapter dues, uh, what are you waiting for? Uh, Now's a good time. $21 at www.nrhswis.org. You can pay right online. We very recently received a couple of renewals through our PO box, and those will be processed, and you'll get acknowledged about them very shortly. So um, if you have not yet paid your 2026 Wisconsin chapter dues, now would be a perfect time, perfect opportunity to get up to date. So thank you for that. Um, let's see. There is a chapter annual business meeting next month. That meeting will take place in person at our meeting place at the North Shore Congregational Church on Friday, February 6th. Um, And there will also be a program to go along with that. The program is going to be Keith Schmidt has a program of some interesting things. I'm not sure what that's going to be, but there will be a program to go along with our business meeting. Among the other things going on at the business meeting will be our annual election where we elect our officers and directors. And again, if you are a member in good standing of the Wisconsin chapter and of the national NRHS, you are entitled to vote and run for office. There is one board member vacancy. So if you had ever considered helping lead this chapter forward, talk to one of us. Talk to Keith, talk to me, talk to one of the current directors. We can get you set up and talk about getting you nominated. Of course, we'll take nominations from the floor. Um, and I think as far as I know, all of the incumbent directors and officers are running for re-election, yet there still is one vacancy. So please do keep that in mind. So that's going to help happen at our meeting next month, and that will be Friday, uh, February 6th. Thank you for that. And also thank you for Dave Nelson. Dave is a local Fox Point resident. He very, very regularly comes down early before the meetings to set everything up. I would like to endorse a round of applause for Dave for setting up tonight's meeting in situ at the church in Fox Point. Thank you, Dave, for doing that. So, with that, and thank you all for your applauses. Appreciate that. We're going to get started. I'm going to ask you all to remain muted um, during the meeting here, the duration. At the end, we'll have an opportunity to ask questions, and perhaps even during the actual presentation itself. That's going to be up to our presenters. Our presenters are Clark Johnson and Nona Hill. Um, they had a private car called Caritas that but they're going to tell you all about it. They had it from it was running frequently from 1984 through I think the late 20 teens or so. But they will give us all the complete rundown on the status of the car and the history and so forth. And it is spelled Caritas, not to be confused with carnitas, which is a pork dish that my daughter and son-in-law made us for Christmas. So we're not having carnitas for dinner. We're having caritas. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nona and Clark and ask you to unmute yourself and come to the fore and give us your presentations. Let's give a warm Wisconsin chapter welcome to Nona and Clark.
Caritas has an interesting history. Among other things, it had more miles on it when we sold it than any other private car. And on the right is its first brochure, the only one we ever had. Inside was all sorts of pictures of the kitchen and the bedrooms and all that sort of thing. I always get asked what caritas means, and it's the Greek word for charity, but it means charity in a very universal sort of way for your fellow human beings. I am not from a railroad family, but I became fascinated with trains when I was growing up because out of my bedroom window in my high chair, I could watch the Minneapolis and St. Louis switch cars in their Cedar Lake yard. And my first memory of a PV was seeing the Emmett St. L business car, shown here, go by on their doodlebug pulled passenger train. It was always sort of interesting to see the doodlebug pulling the passenger train. Mr. Sprague, the railroad's savior, is on the right. This photo was taken in the 1940s, and behind me is the Cedar Lake Roundhouse, and the car is sitting basically on the main line heading out. The power pole in the back, believe it or not, is still there. Around 1944, Mr. Sprague personally showed me the Twin Cities. Some 10 years later, I borrowed it for a railfan trip on the Minnesota Western Railway that the Emmett St. L had just acquired. This 114-mile-long Granger line terminated in the tiny unincorporated town of Glick, where the railroad's remains are not visible today. 15 miles remain, but it was my first ride in a business car, and I was hooked. In 1963, 6 of us were able to purchase Sioux Line business car 48 for $3,500. Okay, anyway, this is the inside of the 48 Twin Cities. It's really it was quite nice. Each room was finished in a different kind of wood, and there's an interesting story about one of the rooms, which I'll tell you guys some other time. Anyway, we renamed it Twin Cities from 48 and used it on numerous trips out of Minneapolis, primarily on the Emmett St. L, Chicago Great Western, Grand Trunk, Sioux Line, and Milwaukee. One memorable trip was on the South Shore, where we went out of Randolph Street Station, pulled by the regular train, and dropped here in Michigan City. I'd like to make another observation about a trip we took on the Grand Trunk, in which we went from Minneapolis to Brush Street Station on the Grand Trunk in Detroit, coming down on the overnight mail train from Minneapolis on Milwaukee 54, and arriving in Chicago at 5 a.m. And believe it or not, the railroad switched us over to Dearborn Station in 3 hours, so we could leave at 8:30 on the Grand Trunk train. Could anybody conceive of Amtrak doing anything like that today? Anyway, the group broke up in 1966 because I moved to Boston, and the business car was sold to the New Hope and Ivyland Railroad as their business car, and it sat at the Ivyland depot for about 3 years, never used, before it was sold to a restaurant complex in Walnut Creek, California. Walnut Creek was on the San Ramon branch. Long abandoned, but it was kept almost in its original condition, and we've had a chance to eat there half a dozen times. Uh, now that car and the station are both gone, replaced by condos. In those early days, moving a car, one simply called the railroad's local freight agent and said where you wanted to go. A switch engine would show up, an inspector would come by, walk around the car, and off we'd go. Well, the PV bug bit me again in 1982. The CN was selling their fleet of ex-Frisco uh, uh, and Katy 14-4 sleepers. With some advice on which one to buy, I selected the Pierre Leclerc. It was the Churchill Falls on the CN because it had just acquired new side sheets. The Marciano selected the Cimarron River. For $10,000, I was now a proud owner of the car. CN prepared it for interchange, and I rode it back to Milwaukee, attached to Amtrak trains. Amtrak had a Toronto-Chicago train in those days. And here are the two cars getting ready to leave Toronto. It had no lights as the battery had been removed, but the steam heat worked well. It was a cozy but dark ride. On the Frisco, the cars looked like this, which Tony had totally restored to its original Frisco livery. The goal of the Caritas was to be able to sleep 8 guests and a crew of 2 with the capability of self-sufficiency for a week. All we had to do was add water every day. This meant very large tanks for fuel, water, and sewage, and 2 generators. Having 2 generators proved crucial when we were stranded in Adams, Wisconsin, in a 25 below zero night. To a large degree, we copied the floor plan of the Sioux Line 48. This was the car undergoing repair at the Milwaukee car shop. It took 2 years to complete. Anyway, here's what the Churchill Falls looked like when we bought it. 14 roomettes and 4 bedrooms, and we stripped out all of the roomettes, and this is the way the Caritas looked. The 4 bedrooms we kept, and we added the platform, a full kitchen, a dining area, and a master bedroom, and rewired it for 115 volts AC, and replaces the porter's room with storage area. On November 11th, 1984, it left the shops at Milwaukee Railcar in North Milwaukee on a Sioux Line freight train to Minneapolis. And here my son Brett and I are smashing a really cheap bottle of champagne on the coupler. The trip to Minneapolis was uneventful, except that the car bounced like crazy as we went along. It turns out that by moving 5 tons of steel, the 14 roomettes, we had to change the spring constants. So I calculated new spring constants, and we put new springs in, and from there on in, we were in great shape. Our first really long trip was Explorers 1. In 1987, in which we started out in Minneapolis and went to Hay River, way. Here we go. Way up there in the Northwest Territories. This was a really interesting trip because it was our first experience covering a lot of railroads. We used the BN from Minneapolis to Duluth, Winnipeg, and Pacific. To Winnipeg, the CN's Continental from Winnipeg to Edmonton, and then ran special from there. And the line we went along was due north out of Edmonton, as you can see there. Yes,
Edmonton, and they went up
and
here.
went up to Hay River, which is on the lake, and Pine Point over here on the right, 57 miles away. We parked along the way in a fairly significant town, and everybody went into town for dinner. one of the interesting things that I remember about that was there was a young woman there who played pool, and everybody challenged her, but she ran the table on everybody who played and extracted quite a bit of money. On the way back, we ended up. Let me take the little doodaddy thing here. We ended up going down this way. This is the Alberta Resources Railway, and I think we've been the only train that's went over that. But before we got there, we parked in this little town of Rycraft, and we discovered it was a picnic grounds right in the middle of the Y. And we discovered this little branch that went out here to the Spirit River. And that had been in the plan. So I asked the trainmaster, could we just simply back down here to pick up this little piece of land? And he said, sure. Oh, and I need to tell you that the trainmaster's name was Jim Vina, now president of the Union Pacific. So that was pretty interesting. Anyway, we came down here on the Alberta Resources Railroad. This goes through extraordinarily rugged country. The only town that along the way was a division point in this little place called Winniandy. We came down to Swan River and got back on the CN, went down to Vancouver and came back on the Great Northern to the Amtrak Great Northern train to Minneapolis. For every high iron trip, we generated a booklet that had not only maps, history, timetables, and the like. Now, I had not considered a number of troublesome issues, but the first was winter parking. While the Caritas is fully winterized, we scarcely used it in the winter. It really slept around at 18 different locations in 35 years. I'll mention a couple of the more bizarre ones. The engine house of the now defunct Nicolay Badger in Northern in Leona, Wisconsin. The engine house of the ex-Charles City Western in Charles City, Iowa. The Sioux Line Shoreham Shops Roundhouse, now condos. The former TNNO SB shops in San Antonio, Texas, and an obscure siding in McCurdy, Indiana. We quickly learned that there was a small subcategory of rail fans who were ardent mileage collectors and were willing to pay in excess of $1,000 to explore new routes. In retrospect, I'm really quite surprised that the first trip to Canada came off. We traveled 6,000 miles on the CN, and yet we had very few issues. The first one, however, was that we wanted to avoid buying liquor licenses, so we decided we'd have an open bar. Well, the booze ran out their first night. I then discovered how expensive booze was in Canada. One of the interesting and disappointing occurrences is a line abandoned just after we traveled them. And there have been several. The first of which I've already mentioned was on the trip to Hay River and Great Slave Lake. The line to over to Pine Point, 57-mile branch. We were the last train on it because a few months before the mine had closed. And when we came in there, the people hated us because they thought we were the mine owners showing up in this fancy train. We were the last train to Pine Point. Starting in 1992, Nona came on board, and we stopped using volunteer help because she insisted we pay people. And here we are on one of our later trips. Now we drove each route, visiting railroad division points to discuss possible operating issues, locate parking options, find water, sewage services, nearby liquor stores, and hopefully mud-free access. We tried to park before dinner each night so the passengers could eat off the train and explore locally. Once each trip, we would hold the Explorers Banquet, usually in a restaurant or hotel, where each passenger and crew member would introduce themselves and tell us about their lives. In addition to the 17 explorers, we ran 5 trips that covered and We ran 5 trips that covered over 80% of Mexican mileage and went twice into Guatemala. We also covered 60% of Canadian rail mileage. And there were numerous three weekend jaunts with our little 3-car consist. Here's the consist of we're headed up on the Wisconsin Central towards Sault Ste. Marie. Working with the railroads was becoming increasingly difficult. The old management folks had been on board when the railroad operated passenger service were now retiring. The new hires are often not even railroaders, but lawyers, accountants, and hedge fund managers. Passengers terrified them. No longer could we move occupied passenger cars and freight trains. But we had several remarkable friends. The first was Ed Burkhart. When he formed the Wisconsin Central, the railroad became friendly. He'd been our friend on the Northwestern, frequently moving the Caritas back and forth between Minneapolis and Milwaukee. We were permitted to go virtually anywhere on the WCL. Our first trip with Ed at the throttle was from Chicago to Duluth, just a few months after the railroad's creation. Subsequently, we covered almost all of the railroad, including branch lines of the El Roma Central and the Green Bay and Western. We also made friends with the Kansas City Southern. Our first contact with the KCS, requesting to move the Caritas unoccupied, got the response, "We do not handle passenger cars," and hung up on us. But in 1996, Mike Haverty became the president, and we were welcomed on the railroad. Over the following years, we covered the entire system from Tuscaloosa to Fort Worth, and from KC to Port Arthur, and to Lizarras Cardenas in southern Mexico. This photograph here is on the Gateway Western en route to Chicago. One nice thing is that the KCS generally provided their executive engines as our motive power. We twice went a few hundred yards into Guatemala at Tican-Oman, where the gauge changes. Now, normally Guatemala requires a passport, but $5 bills from each passenger work just as well. And the soldier in the back here rode the platform. This happens to be in 1997, and this is the Prairie Rose, which is the Wisconsin Central's business car, because the Caritas was sick for that trip. Putting the Caritas on freight moves usually required about $25 million liability insurance, but this became a really serious issue after the Chase Amtrak wreck. Many of the railroads simply refused to handle occupied passenger cars and freight trains, even though there was a drover's tariff to do so. We could generally still travel on regional railroads and on a couple of the class ones, like the CP, which operated Milwaukee trackage, and shown here 7 miles west of Marquette on the ex-Milwaukee line to Mason City. The cars and this consists of the Caritas, Silver Rapids, Pine Tree State, Cimarron River, Columbia River, Native Sun, and North Star. A couple of other interesting trips need to be mentioned. The largest collection of private cars, 35 in total, were at the 1995 APRCO convention in Nelson, British Columbia, where Nona and I were the trip chairpersons. There were 2 special trains, one originating in Los Angeles and the other originating in Chicago. And this is the Chicago train at Kootenai Landing, just inside British Columbia. And here we have Jack Swanberg took this picture climbing up on a light pole to take a picture of the 2 trains parked at the Nelson, British Columbia yard. This was a fantastic convention location. Downtown was in walking distance. Everybody fell all over themselves to make us comfortable and happy, and the scenery was magnificent. The last trip we ran, Amtrak was generally willing to operate special trains offline, and this is how we operated many of the high iron trips. Amtrak would furnish the locomotives and crews, as in this picture, and the host railroad a pilot. Often a train master, division superintendent would accompany us, arranging for photos on the fly. When the new Amtrak president, Richard Anderson from Delta, took over, all non-Amtrak route special trains were prohibited. Our last offline special was this one, June of 2016, when the Front Range Explorers went from Denver up the Wind River line on the BN through Forsyth, Montana, and over the former Milwaukee from Terry, Montana to Appleton, Minnesota, where we got back on the BNSF for the trip to Minneapolis. However, by this time, High Iron had become a subsidiary of Iowa Pacific, and they had insurance. The insurance enabled the operation of a number of specials. In 2012, Pan Am, Boston to Maine to most of us, ran a special for us out of Boston's North Shore Station to Mechanicsville, and then back to Hoosick Junction. And here we are going into the Hoosick Tunnel on that trip. Next to it is a photo of us, the same train, going across the Hudson River en route to Mechanicsville. And then we went back to North Bennington, Hoosick Junction, and parked overnight in North Bennington. I really love this picture. It is almost, it looks like a model. The Caritas is at the other end behind the engine. Iowa Pacific provided opportunities for trips too. And here's the Caritas at the depot in Globe, Arizona, on the Arizona Eastern in April 7th, 2008. One of the more unusual events was the Texas State Railroad steam engine putting us on the rear of 22 at Palestine, Texas. Iowa Pacific was running the railroad at that point, so they were pretty cooperative. I believe this was the only time a steam engine has actually put a private car on the back of Amtrak. I might mention that the reason this is at Palestine was because number 22 had been rerouted, and we took advantage of that rerouting because the rerouting was through Palestine. We had a chance to go on the Mason City and Clear Lake, as you can see here by the overhead wire. COVID and Iowa Pacific's bankruptcy ended high iron travel. The Caritas, with 850,000 miles on it during our ownership, was sold to the Friends of the 261 and continues to ply the rails. This is LaGrange, Illinois. I'm sorry, Naperville. On Amtrak number 5 en route to Denver to join up with Bennett Levin's National Parks special. Now I turn it over to Nona to tell her part of this tale.
I'm going to show some glimpses of the things that happen when you travel by private car. When we presented this program for the Lexington group last November, we could also submit an article that was published in a book for attendees at the meeting. One of the things I mentioned in the book, that none of our trips would have been possible without our dedicated crews, especially Tom and Sharon Sherritt, Steve and Donna DeGroat, and our chef, Clay Hollifield. Their hard work, and many others who I have not named, gave countless hours of their time over the years and made our participation possible. My presentation is dedicated to all my crew. This is Clark, back in 1937, posing in front of the Southern Pacific 4411, when his mother and grandmother took him to California to recuperate from a bout of pneumonia. And here I am in El Paso, Texas, when I was lucky enough to be taken out of school to go visit my grandparents in Phoenix with my mother. I find it amazing that 2 children from the Midwest ended up in front of SP steam locomotives, the only early photos I could locate for either one of us that included a standard gauge train. This is a picture that shows the very best part of private car travel. A sunny day on a freight line with no platform restrictions and most of the passengers dining or napping. Otherwise, it would have been too crowded for us to be standing out there enjoying it. Over the years, passengers sent us many photos. This one arrived in a Christmas card from Frank Fairbanks, a two-car train to Topolobampo, Mexico, parked near the Copper Canyon, probably early morning before departure. These photo gifts were precious. We never would have seen this particular scene without it. I'm sure Clark and I were on the car, too busy to be outside with a camera. We took group photos whenever and wherever we could. This is a shot in Durango, Mexico, and Bill Farmer took the photo. He enabled our travels to Mexico because he spoke fluent Choo-Choo Spanish, which allowed us to communicate with both the railroad crew and the onboard crew that we were required to hire for our Mexican trips. On the left, you see the kitchen that I inherited in 1992, and the photos on the right show the 2008 remodel and current kitchen. No original location of any appliance changed, but after the remodel, we had much less to worry about in the line of on-road repairs for appliances. That was critical because, as you can see, there's a break front on the sink side of the kitchen in the lower right-hand photo. And in order to repair the refrigerator prior to the even now, you would have to pull the refrigerator out, and it only goes so far. So unless a very skinny repair person shows up, you're doomed. Now I have a series of photos I call Things That Can Stop a Train. This washout near War Road, Minnesota certainly prevented us from getting the mileage beyond the stop sign. And the liquor delivery for the American Private Car Owners Association car party was delayed by an inexperienced driver and a slightly wider turn than required for the platform in Tampa. Underneath the shed back there, Jim Larson, Amtrak Vice President of Operations, is standing, but he's too far away to see if he is laughing or upset from this distance. The grinning driver, a fellow car owner, had borrowed the cart from Amtrak and is now heading over to their office to look for assistance. Before this trip, if you had told me that tumbleweed could stop a train, I would not have believed you. Now we have proof. It was a windy day on what is now the Kansas and Oklahoma Railroad, and the tumbleweed was moving across the track. It built up until the engineer was unable to see to continue. Many hands may make light work, but it doesn't keep the dust from making you cough and sneeze when you get back to the car. Whitetail, Montana is the original western extension of the Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Sault Ste. Marie Railroad, the Soo Line, but its plans to reach the west coast never made it past Whitetail. We are stopped because the view from the locomotive looks like this. You can see that the grading went beyond where the track ends. Our longtime chef, Clay Hollifield, asked for a copy of this photo to explain mileage collecting to his mother. As a Disney employee at Epcot, she just did not understand why we went all the way out to the middle of a wheat field when there was nothing else to see or do there that she understood. On a smoking stop in Texas, we took the time to record the passing of the Grey Poupon mustard from an SP business car to the Caritas, staged because of a popular TV commercial at the time, which showed the same thing. The mustard was going between Rolls Royces at Ascot in the commercial. Clark's son Taylor was ferrying the Caritas on the DWP between Duluth and Winnipeg when the Canadian customs agent asked him how much liquor he had on board. Clark and I were driving to Winnipeg and had neglected to do any strategic storage before we left. Taylor ended up paying a $300 fine for our oversight, but he was able to get this rare picture of Canadian customs at work. No doubt this photo would be strictly prohibited today. Had Clark and I thought about customs ahead of time, there would only have been a few bottles in the liquor cabinet. A Pullman sleeper has wonderful liquor storage possibilities in every room. Upper berths are particularly helpful for that. Here are a couple of unusual on-the-road experiences, again from Mexico. On the left, we have rolled out our larger generator for a minor repair and an oil change. On the right, we have the strangest diesel fuel fill I ever experienced. There was no access for a truck in our particular parking place, and we needed fuel. So they arranged for these young men to wheel in a 55-gallon drum of fuel on a hand cart, and they spun a little hand pump on the top to fill our tank. A needs must situation, and it worked like a charm. The gentleman on the right is the Pullman conductor who guarded our train throughout the trip. We made 2 wonderful trips along the Oregon coast and enjoyed the advantage of a gondola car with seats that we christened the Vistagon. It enabled all of our passengers to be outdoors with unobstructed views, great for photography, except during rain showers. On the second trip, the former Prairie Rose, back to its original name Montana by this time, derailed, and that is the car right behind the Vistagon. We were miles away from any assistance in the middle of a densely wooded area that stopped us until a crew with a re-railing frog could reach us, a matter of a few hours. It was only about 30 minutes before we got going again once they arrived. We had no cell service until much later in the day when Clark had the difficult task of calling the car owners and telling them what had happened. Fortunately, we were able to complete our excursion, but the Montana had an extended stay in Portland for wheel repairs before it was able to be on an Amtrak train to return to Minneapolis. This trip on the Colorado and Wyoming Railroad was arranged for the receiver to show the line to prospective buyers. Clark spotted this turntable along the way and asked if we could turn the car so the passengers could enjoy the line both directions instead of just one way. It was such a tight fit that the receiver insisted that Clark write him a release to take all responsibility should anything go wrong. It was only a matter of inches from the end of the turntable to the wheel sets. It really was. I could understand his concern. I have a series of photos of the entire event, but I did not have video capability at the time. The fence had to be held away over on this side so the coupler wouldn't pull the poles over, and they ended up pulling it after about halfway. They put a tractor on it with a rope and towed it the rest of the way around. So it was quite a series of photos. And this photo is to remind me to talk about logistics, the bane of organizing the arrival and departure of the crews, groceries, rental cars, airport pickups, buses, whatever and whenever needed for any given trip. This day, we had just unloaded the lounge chairs from the Caritas. We're at Midway Station. My sister and I are about to drive Tom Sherritt's car with the trailer to take them to Hermansville, Michigan for new upholstery. We would leave the trailer there, drive back to Minneapolis to get me home. Sharon would go on to Westby to get her car back from Tom, and she could go back to Madison. 2 weeks later, Tom would pick up the finished chairs in the trailer and bring them back to Midway Station in time for our next trip. It all went like clockwork, and the total price was less than any upholsterer in Minneapolis would have charged. This is another picture from Mexico with our Mexican crew standing back by the buffet and the Prairie Rose being used as a dining car. The chef usually cooked in the Caritas kitchen with its larger capacity refrigerator, stove, and oven, and the crew ferried food next door to feed the passengers. This extra room enabled us to feed all of the passengers in 2 seatings and freed up the Caritas lounge for those waiting for second call to dinner.
You might mention Jim Larson.
And Jim Larson is seated here facing us again. He was a great friend of private cars. I would say one of the best friends at Amtrak that every private car owner ever had. When people we did not know first heard that we owned and operated a railroad car, they would ask about the beautiful scenery we had seen. Almost anything I see from a train can be interesting, but our passengers were paying the fare for mileage. It did not matter if we were in this desert environment or in northern Wisconsin in a forest of trees. The view was not the allure. They wanted the miles, in daylight if possible, and the only thing that really disappointed them was any change in plan that prevented them getting an inch of the mileage that Clark had originally promised in the trip brochure. On the other hand, we saw many amazing sights and had lots of worthwhile and even spectacular photo run-bys. As you can see from the distance here, the train had to back up a long way for us to get this shot of the Devil's Spine, again in Mexico. This is my chief plumber, electrician, and mechanic doing his best to ruin one of the dining room tables in the lounge. I had to stop him while I found some newspaper to protect the table before the saw was used. He is converting a US head-end power cable to a Canadian one so that we can get HEP when we're parked in stations and on Via Rail trains that require changing 2 of the pins. We discovered that after having to run our generator all night long in Montreal and protected that cable. It was written all over on the yellow end was, do not give away, Canadian use only, not for US plugs. And we never lost it.
No.
And here he is voiding the warranty on his MacBook. The computer was not working, and much to my surprise and our passengers, he fixed the problem, and it served him well for many years. You meet some interesting people along the way. This young man brought his M&M friends with him on a day trip from Boston to New York and back. He set them up at various places around the car for special photographs during the day when we were traveling, and put all of them on the platform prior to departure that evening so he could film them in the tunnel as we left Penn Station. He was happy to let me record the moment for our photo albums that lived on board the car. The next few pictures are all in my hometown, Madison, Wisconsin. In this one, we brought the car in for my niece's wedding and parked it a block and a half from the house I grew up in, where my brother was still living. We used, it's on off Fair Oaks Avenue on the branch to Watertown. Interesting thing about this parking spot, I'll get to that in a minute. And anyway, we used it for a baby shower for another niece, and I woke up the day of the wedding to this. Instead of helping to decorate the church, I was off to the auto parts store for carbon choke cleaner and lots of paper towels. Fortunately, it removes fresh spray paint easily on the body, but the Lexan windows were cloudy until they were replaced. When I came out to take a picture of the state capitol, which you can see down this line. And I took the photographs looking at the capitol, making sure I got the car in it. And I didn't see it until I looked at the car closely. Then I went running in to tell Clark. It was kind of a shock because we had been parked here overnight. We had slept on board. We had turned the generator off. It was a perfectly comfortable night, no air conditioning, no fan running, and we did not hear a thing. This was an Iowa Pacific special from Chicago to Prairie du Chien via Madison. A photographer caught the train crossing Lake Monona with a view of the Capitol and downtown. Fortunately, Ed Ellis knew the photographer, and I was able to get a full-size image. We have a very special 12 by 36 canvas print that we enjoy seeing every day in our family room. And for those of you who know Madison, the skyline does not look like this anymore. Madison is in the midst of a building boom, and there are plenty of high-rise apartments, particularly on the left in the campus area, that you would see in any picture that was taken here today. This is a similar trip that was run on Apico Midwest Special that was run a few years earlier, parked at the former Milwaukee Road Station in Madison with color-coordinated trains and tulips. The train on the right is a stationary display. The station itself is now a bicycle shop,
And a restaurant.
but the freight house behind it is a very fine local supper club called the Harvey House. The Caritas is still on the road. It is owned by the Friends of the 261. Clark and I were lucky enough to be invited to ride a positioning move from Chicago to New Orleans recently and thoroughly enjoyed our visit to our old home. The Art Deco ladies are still in the lounge, although they light up in a rainbow of new and different colors. The rear door is new, as you can see on the right side of the picture. So you can no longer keep track of your great nieces and nephews' growth by which window they look out. Nor can you frame that perfect shot from inside the lounge. If you have any photos framed by that door, treasure them. But it was the best of fun and worth every minute, as this Mardi Gras trip to New Orleans shows in the many happy faces. I saw that Brian Higgins was on board. This is Brian and his wife. Is watching the show tonight. Brian and his wife are here. This is the owner of the Cimarron River, Tony Marciando, his brother Andy, another owner. This is Andy's wife, and this is Tony's wife, and a pretty young Clark Johnson and Nona Hill. Before I quit sharing, I would like to explain why I chose this galloping goose photo. I never expected that I would ever ride one. I had no idea there was a functioning goose that could still be used. A summer trip to Alamosa enabled us to divide our passengers into 3 groups, and on one day, everyone rode part of the day on the Chama steam train, part on the Galloping Goose, and part on the bus. A minor miracle and a memorable day, especially for us, with fellow car owner and friend Fred Springer as our conductor on the Goose.
Thank you, Clark and Nona. Wonderful presentation. You put on some miles. You're here to answer any questions, and I think Ed Kohler has his hand up, so we'll hear from Ed.
I just wanted to congratulate Clark and Nona on having a wonderful experience and doing a wonderful presentation. And like they say, when you sell a boat, is it the best day when you sell the boat, or the best day when you sell the car?
No,
It's a mixed blessing. It was time. Aging does tend to make lifting heavy railroad tools and doing repairs and hauling groceries difficult. But it was very sad for us, because when Amtrak basically shut us down, we had another trip planned, and in fact, I had to refund $154,000 for passengers. So Amtrak would have gotten the lion's share of that money, and they didn't give us any warning. They just announced it, that no more special trains.
to answer your question about the car, I enjoyed working in the car, but when I got to be about 80, I had a hard time picking up a 15-pound wrench and wiggling my way under the car. So a lot of the psychic reward I got from working on it no longer occurred.
Well understood. I had to give up running at the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum because my knees wouldn't let me crawl under the car to bleed the air tanks.
Thanks, Ed. Any other questions or comments or anything for our presenters tonight?
Yeah, I would just like to say you guys have done what most of my adult life, think about doing, or at least in the last few minutes of drifting off to sleep. I always thought what it must be like to to have a private railroad car going all over. And in my dreams, I just point to a place on the map and take the car down there. And you guys are as close as I ever got to my dreams. You guys are so fortunate, and we really appreciate you sharing this with us. I mean, it's just great riding those cars all over the place. Thank you for sharing it with us.
It was wonderful. When the best trips for me were when we moved the car by ourselves. And in fact, we were 15 and a half hours late on an Amtrak train, a day late to start a trip to Canada. But Clark and I were alone on the car. So it was probably the worst trip ever for everyone on the Amtrak train. But it was a wonderful trip for us. We had food, we had we were totally protected. We had head-end power, so it was like a bonus day. And in fact, we had an extra day in New York because we missed our train and couldn't go till the next day. And we got to see a show, got to go see Alan Rickman in Private Lives on Broadway that night. So it was like
Bonus.
one of the best days of my life.
Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine. Oh, that's great stuff. Really nice.
Now, one of the things I didn't mention about talking about trips in Wisconsin was our trip down to the docks in Kewanee about 3 years after the dock closed, but the rail yard was still there, and we backed down and as far as we could into Kewanee. But the Kewanee yard had turned into being a seagull rookery. And there is thousands of seagulls that were hatching between the ties. Well, as we backed down, there was a furious uproar of birds. And I guess the main thing was that the train needed a bath after we left.
I love those things.
Wonderful
Do you have any idea of writing all this down and doing a book? There must be a story about this.
We have talked about publishing the mileage log because we think there might be some interest in that. It was really fun, even for us, when we were studying for this trip and digging out pictures and so forth. We had to consult. If we didn't have a mileage log, we wouldn't have been able to get dates correct because neither one of us kept a personal log. We trusted the car's mileage log to record all our trips. And it was fun to just read through it. It really was. It brought back a lot of memories for both of us.
Nice. Nice. That's great.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Fred. Good to see you on here tonight. Anything else for Clark and Nona before we close the
Clark
meeting
and
down?
Nona, Kevin here. Could you hazard a guess as to who had the most miles as a customer in that car?
The passengers, I would say the top contenders had to be
Paul Morrison.
Paul Morrissey, probably, because he got on every freight railroad locomotive he could. He was a dispatcher.
He means with us.
Oh, no.
You mean with us, or do you mean?
No, with you guys. With you guys.
With us. Oh, I don't know. Harmon might have had he'd had started late though. I mean, he chartered the car too, so he got a lot that way. But as far as new miles, that would be hard to say. We had a lot of good regular passengers that rode almost every trip, every one they could.
Yeah, I'd say there were a dozen passengers who on almost every trip.
Awesome.
And our crews put on a lot of miles.
Well, I think Alan Butler there, it certainly was on a lot. It was on probably has as much mileage as anybody. What do you think, Al? You're not. You know,
Yeah,
you'll have to turn.
He's going after it. He's going to unmute, maybe.
Unmute. Unmute.
He is. He's looking for it. You're not young anymore. Down on the bottom left. You might have to.
This is Brian.
Oh, hi, Brian.
Hi. I thought they used to talk about Frank Fairbanks being like one of the biggest collectors of all time. I think he had a lot of course.
I would say Frank Fairbanks, Ed Graham, they traveled, especially people who traveled all over the world.
Right. And you mentioned Paul.
Really put on a lot of
What
miles.
Captain Newcomb.
Oh, Phil Bush?
Yeah, Phil Bush. Newcomb Bush.
But he wouldn't fly, so he didn't get anything in Europe. I would say, I see Sharon's on and Brian's on and Jim Fetro's on. I mean, we put on many, many, many miles over and over and over again. I probably have more between Chicago and Minneapolis than anybody else.
One of the interesting, speaking of people who rode with us a lot, was a guy by the name of Dusty Rhodes from Tyler, Texas. Well, we were going off to
It was the Sioux Line
the
Explorers.
Sioux Line Explorers, and we left for Minneapolis. And the theory was we were going to take Amtrak number 7 to Minot and then get on the Sioux Line there. Well,
Nelson.
Amtrak had a strike, and so we weren't going to do that. But the Sioux Line, bless their heart, said, "Okay, we'll take you from the St. Paul station, the old Midway station, and we'll just start there." Well, Dusty Rhodes thought he was smarter than anybody. He said, "Well, obviously, if Amtrak isn't going to go, they're not going." So he shows up a day late, and that was kind of too bad. But nobody called.
He didn't call. Everybody else was there.
Yeah.
So Clark and Nona, I'm just really happy to have traveled on 3 of your latter Explorers trips between 2012 and 2016. I guess the Southwest, the Rocky Mountain, and the Front Range, and just before Amtrak lowered the boom. And I used to work at San Francisco Airport, and I remember, Clark, that you called me soon after Richard Anderson showed up and said, "What can you do? You worked at an airport. Can you do anything about Anderson?" And I said, "Well, we actually don't have too much pull over airlines." So it was worth a shot. But in any case, I really enjoyed those 3 long trips. Really a treat. So thank you so much.
Good.
We enjoyed them too. They were great trips.
An interesting thing is that for 2 years, the UP had always been very hostile. For 2 years, they got very friendly, and in 2 years we ran all over on the UP, and then they management changed, and no more special trains. But the one was extraordinary. We went on the Texas and Pacific all the way to El Paso, then the former Rock Island all the way back to Kansas City. And by the way, the Explorers trip was kind of written up by Bob Johnson, who I see is here, in the I believe is the summer edition of Classic Trains. There was an article in there about that trip.
Very good. Anything else before we close the meeting for tonight?
Just a thank you to Clark and Nona for all the miles.
Wow.
Yep.
And thank you guys all for showing up. We appreciate that. It's good to see your faces.
Hey, folks, I wish you all a safe trip home and stay dry and warm.
I tell you what, folks, we're gonna close the meeting here with a reminder: those who have not yet paid their 2026 Wisconsin chapter NRHS dues, please do so right now on our website, www.nrhswis.org. $21, and that also applies to the many guests that we have here. We would love to welcome you into the Wisconsin chapter family. So please do consider this your personal invitation to become a member and a supporter of the Wisconsin chapter NRHS. We meet again next month, February 6th, same time, same bat channel. Keith Schmidt will have a program up his sleeve. It will also be the Wisconsin chapter annual business meeting. So, I mean, that's really exciting. And beyond that, although we're going to shut down the meeting, we invite anybody who wishes to stay online here for a little bit of charming afterglow chit chat and discussion, very informal with the recording turned off, you're welcome to do so. So with that, thank you all for participating tonight. Thank you to all in the church, and thank you, Dave Nelson, for setting up the room and doing our AV locally there. Thanks all for participating tonight, and we'll see you next month.